The day I found out my husband had blocked my credit cards, I was standing in the middle of Target with a cart full of baby stuff, diapers, a pack of onesies, some gentle wash, and my card declined. Not once, 3 times. I remember the exact sound it made, that flat, dead beep. The cashier, a teenager with purple nails, glanced up at me with that practiced look of pity that retail workers perfect after about the 3rd month on the job. "Do you want to try a different card?" she asked. I had a different card. I had 2, actually. Both declined. I was 7 months pregnant. My ankles were swollen. I had driven 22 minutes to this Target specifically because it had the brand of fragrance-free wipes my OB had recommended. And now I was standing there digging through my wallet like a woman who doesn't know her own finances, which, I was about to learn, was exactly what I had become. I paid cash, $63.47, which was almost everything I had on me. I sat in my car in the Target parking lot and called my husband Brandon 4 times before he picked up. "Hey," he said, casual, like I was calling to ask what he wanted for dinner. "Brandon, my cards aren't working." "Oh, yeah." A pause. "There might be a bank thing. I'll look into it." A bank thing. That's what he called it. A bank thing. 3 weeks later, I would be sitting across from a divorce attorney named Patricia Weiss, listening to her explain what financial control actually looks like under Georgia law. But that day in the Target parking lot, I still believed him. I still thought it was a bank thing. Let me back up, because if I'm going to tell this story right, and I need to tell it right for my own sake as much as anything, I have to take you back to before. Back to when I thought Brandon Mitchell was the best decision I had ever made. I met Brandon at a work happy hour in the fall of 2019. I was 28, working as a project coordinator for a mid-sized construction firm in Atlanta. And I had just gotten out of a 2-year relationship with a guy named Derek, who turned out to be emotionally unavailable in the specific, exhausting way that men who describe themselves as emotionally intelligent often are. I wasn't looking for anything serious. I was on my 2nd glass of wine and half listening to my coworker Janelle talk about her kitchen renovation. Brandon walked in with a friend of a friend. He was tall, 6'2", broad shoulders, the kind of easy smile that makes you feel like you're the most interesting person in the room. He worked in commercial real estate, he said. He had grown up in Marietta, gone to Georgia State, and had a golden retriever named Duke. He texted me the next morning, not that night, the next morning, which felt respectful and deliberate in a way that I registered as a green flag. We dated for 8 months before he asked me to move in. I had my own apartment, a 1-bedroom in Decatur that I loved, with original hardwood floors and a clawfoot tub. But Brandon had a house, an actual house in a quiet subdivision in Smyrna, 3 bedrooms, a backyard, a 2-car garage. It made sense financially, he said. We were spending every weekend together anyway. I gave up my apartment in June of 2020. Looking back, I gave up a lot more than the apartment. But at the time, it felt like growing up. It felt like choosing something real. We got engaged in October of 2020. He proposed at this little Italian place we loved on the Beltline. Nothing over the top, just candles and good wine, and a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, which I thought was the most romantic thing in the world. My mom cried when I called her. My dad drove up from Savannah the next weekend to take us to dinner and shook Brandon's hand for what felt like a full 30 seconds. We got married in March of 2021. 40 people, backyard ceremony, my best friend Courtney as maid of honor. It rained right up until the moment we said our vows and then stopped. We took that as a sign. For about a year and a half, things were genuinely good. Not perfect, I want to be honest about that. Brandon could be stubborn. He didn't like asking for help, and he didn't like being wrong. And sometimes those two things combined in ways that made simple disagreements feel like negotiations. But he was also funny and present, and he remembered things. Not just my birthday, but the small stuff, like how I always needed a few minutes of quiet after work before I could talk, or how I took my coffee. His mother, Linda, was a different story from the start. Linda Mitchell lived 40 minutes away in a house in Woodstock that she had refused to sell after Brandon's father passed, even though it was too big for one person, and she complained about the maintenance constantly. She called Brandon every single day. Not text, calls, long ones. She had opinions about everything: what we should eat, when we should have children, what neighborhood we should eventually move to, whether the house needed new gutters. It didn't, but she brought it up at Thanksgiving dinner in 2021 like she was delivering a medical diagnosis. I tried. I genuinely tried with Linda. I brought food when we visited. I asked about her garden. I sat through 3 hours of home renovation shows with her on a Saturday afternoon because she said she was lonely, and Brandon had asked me, with his eyes, to please just be patient. I was patient. For a long time, I was so patient. But Linda had a way of looking at me, just slightly past me, like I was a piece of furniture that had been placed in the wrong room, that never fully went away. She loved Brandon with the particular ferocity of a woman who had poured everything into one person, and I was the thing that had divided his attention. She didn't hate me. It would have been easier if she hated me. She just never fully accepted that I was permanent. We found out I was pregnant in November of 2022. Brandon cried, actual tears, standing in our bathroom at 7 a.m, holding the test. I had never seen him cry before. It was one of the most disarming moments of our marriage, and I held on to it for a long time afterward. Longer than I probably should have. My dad was over the moon. He called every week after that, sometimes twice. He had retired the year before and had more time than he knew what to do with, and the idea of a grandchild had lit something up in him that I hadn't seen in years. In January, he called to tell me he was sending money, $3,000 specifically, for the nursery. Get whatever you need, he said. The good stuff. Don't let Brandon tell you it's too expensive. He laughed when he said it. He was joking. We both were. He wired the money directly to our joint checking account on January 14th. I saw the deposit notification on my phone. I remember thinking, okay, we can finally get the crib I've been looking at, the one from that boutique baby store in Buckhead that I'd been pricing for 2 weeks. I told Brandon about it that evening. He nodded. I saw it come in, he said. I'll take care of it. I thought he meant he'd handle the ordering. He was better at that kind of logistics stuff. Tracking shipments, reading assembly instructions. I figured he'd look up the crib, maybe comparison shop a little. That was on a Thursday. By the following Tuesday, when I tried to use my card at Target, both of my cards were declined. And by the time Brandon finally sat across from me in our kitchen, 3 days after the Target incident, after I had gone from confused to anxious to something that felt uncomfortably close to afraid, and said, with a kind of flat, almost bored certainty, "It wasn't a bank error. I blocked your cards so you wouldn't waste money on yourself." By then, I had already started to understand that the man sitting across from me was not the man I thought I had married. But understanding something and knowing what to do about it are two very different things. And when he told me what had actually happened to my father's $3,000, when he smirked, actually smirked, and said, "Mom already used it to order new furniture," something went very quiet inside me. Not sad, not even angry, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes right before something breaks. I sat at our kitchen table for a long time after Brandon said that. The quiet I mentioned, that deep, almost cellular stillness, lasted maybe 30 seconds. Then something shifted, and the stillness became something harder. "Say that again," I said. He was standing by the counter, arms crossed, and he had that look on his face that I had seen maybe a dozen times over the course of our marriage. Not angry, not guilty, just settled, like a man who had already decided how this conversation was going to go and was waiting for me to catch up. "Your dad sent money for the baby," I said. $3,000. For the nursery. For our child. I know what it was for. And you gave it to your mother. I redirected it. He said the word like it was a corporate term, like we were in a budget meeting and he was discussing resource allocation. Mom needed furniture. Her dining set is 15 years old, Ashley. The chairs are literally falling apart. I stared at him. Her dining set. It's not a big deal. We can replace the nursery stuff later. Brandon. I put my hands flat on the table because I needed something solid. I am 7 months pregnant. My father sent that money specifically. He wired it directly for our baby. And you gave it to your mother to buy dining room chairs. It's not just chairs. It's a full set. Table, chairs, a hutch. The hutch. He said it like that detail made it more reasonable. "And you blocked my cards," I said. "So I couldn't..." "What? So I couldn't notice? So I couldn't stop it?" He shifted his weight. "I blocked your cards because you have a habit of impulse buying, and with the baby coming, we need to be careful with money." "I bought diapers, Brandon. I was buying diapers with my father's money for our baby." "Our finances are shared," he said. "I make the decisions about shared finances." That sentence landed differently than anything else he had said. Not because it was the most outrageous thing. It wasn't. not compared to the furniture, not compared to the blocked cards, but because of how casually he said it. Like it was obvious. Like it was simply a fact about how our household worked that I had somehow failed to absorb. "We have a joint account," I said slowly. "My name is on it. My paycheck goes into it." "You're on leave in 6 weeks. You won't have a paycheck for 3 months." That doesn't give you the right to. I stopped. I took a breath. "I want the money back, Brandon. Call your mother tonight and tell her to cancel the order." Something moved across his face. Not quite a flinch, but close. "She can't cancel it," he said. "What do you mean she can't cancel it?" "The order's been placed. It's custom, non-refundable." I heard a sound that I realized after a moment was coming from me. Not crying, not quite. More like the sound a person makes when the air goes out of the room. "When did she order it?" He didn't answer. "Brandon, when did she order it?" "Last week." "Last week." I counted backward. That was 2 days after my dad wired the money. 2 days. He didn't say anything. "You transferred it to her that fast," I said, "before I even had a chance to notice." He uncrossed his arms and picked up his phone from the counter, which was the thing he did when he wanted to end a conversation without technically leaving it. "It's done, Ashley. We'll figure out the nursery stuff. I'll look at some more affordable options." "More affordable options," I repeated. "You took $3,000 that my father gave us for our baby and spent it on dining room furniture for your mother, and your solution is more affordable options?" "My mother needed. I don't care what your mother needed." My voice came out steady, which surprised me. "I don't care about her dining set. I don't care about the hutch. I care that you took money that was meant for our child. You blocked my access to our accounts without telling me. And you are standing in this kitchen acting like I am the unreasonable one for being upset about it." Brandon set his phone down and looked at me with an expression I had never quite seen on him before. It wasn't anger, and it wasn't guilt. It was something closer to impatience. The look of a person who has explained something twice and is annoyed at having to explain it a third time. "I'm going to call my mom," he said. "You should rest. You're getting worked up and it's not good for the baby." He walked out of the kitchen. I heard him go upstairs. I sat there for another 10 minutes, maybe 15. And then I did something I had never done before in our marriage. I picked up my phone and called my best friend, Courtney. Courtney came over the next morning. Brandon had already left for work, or said he was going to work. I had stopped trusting that the things he said mapped onto the things he actually did. And she sat across from me at the same kitchen table with 2 coffees from the place down the street and listened to the whole thing without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Okay," she said. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to actually think about it before you answer." "Okay." "How long has he been doing this?" I opened my mouth and then closed it, because I had been thinking about that since the night before, lying in bed next to a man who had apparently decided that my access to our money was a privilege rather than a right. And what I had realized, slowly, uncomfortably, like pressing on a bruise, was that I didn't actually know. I don't know, I said. Have you looked at the account? He changed the login password. I tried this morning. Courtney set down her coffee very carefully. He changed the password on your joint account? Yes. Ashley. I know. That's okay. That's not a money disagreement. That's not even a Linda problem. She stopped. Do you have any accounts in just your name? I thought about it. My credit cards, which were blocked but were technically still mine. A savings account I had opened years ago, before Brandon, with maybe $400 in it that I had never gotten around to closing. That was it. Everything else, checking, the joint savings, the investment account Brandon had opened 2 years ago, everything else had both our names on it. But Brandon had set up the logins and managed the access. A small savings account, I said. And the cards, but those are blocked. Courtney reached across the table and put her hand over mine. I think you need to talk to someone. Not a therapist. Well, yes, a therapist, but also an attorney. I'm 7 months pregnant, Courtney. I know. That's why I'm saying it now instead of later. I looked at her and felt the thing I had been holding together since the night before start to come apart slightly at the edges. I keep thinking maybe I'm overreacting. Like, he didn't hit me. He didn't cheat. He made a stupid decision about money. He blocked your cards without telling you, Courtney said. He took $3,000 that your father gave you for your baby and handed it to his mother for furniture. And then he changed the password on your account so you couldn't see what else he's done. She squeezed my hand. That's not a stupid decision, Ash. That's a pattern. I knew she was right. That was the worst part. I already knew she was right. Had known it somewhere underneath the confusion and the exhaustion and the very inconvenient fact that I was going to have a baby in 8 weeks and didn't have a crib. I'll think about it, I said. She gave me a look that meant she wasn't going to push harder, but she also wasn't going to pretend that I'll think about it was good enough. I spent the next 4 days trying to get information. I called the bank. They confirmed that the account credentials had been updated and that, as a joint account holder, I was entitled to access, but that I would need to come in person with ID to reset my login. I drove to the branch on Thursday afternoon. The banker, a young guy named Marcus, walked me through the reset process and then pulled up the account history. He didn't say anything, but I saw his expression change, just slightly, the way people's faces change when they're trying to stay professional and something is making it difficult. I looked at the screen. The $3,000 from my father had come in on January 14th. On January 15th, the very next morning, Brandon had transferred $2,800 to an account I didn't recognize. Not Linda's name, just an account number. But that wasn't what made my stomach drop. What made my stomach drop was the line item from 3 months earlier, in October. A transfer out. $1,500 to the same account number. And before that, in August, $900. I sat in that bank chair, 7 months pregnant, and looked at a transaction history that told a story I hadn't known I was living in. At least $5,200 moved out of our joint account in the past 6 months, all to the same unidentified account number, none of it discussed with me. Can you tell me whose account this is? I asked Marcus. He typed something, looked at the screen. It's a personal account. I can't give you the account holder's name, privacy policy, but I can tell you it's a personal checking account at this same bank. Is there any way to find out? Not without a legal process, he said. I'm sorry. I drove home with a printed statement folded in my purse and a feeling in my chest like a stone that had been dropped into very deep water and hadn't hit the bottom yet. I thought about what Courtney had said. I thought about Patricia Weiss, the divorce attorney whose name I had looked up the night before and not yet called. And then I pulled into our driveway and I saw Brandon's car, which should not have been there at 2 p.m. on a Thursday, and I sat for a moment before going inside. He was on the phone in the kitchen. He didn't hear me come in. She went to the bank today, he was saying. I know, Mom. Just don't say anything if she calls you. A pause. Because she's going to find out about the account eventually, and I need to handle it before she does something stupid. I stood in the hallway and listened to my husband tell his mother how to manage me. And the stone in my chest finally hit the bottom. I didn't move for a full minute. I stood in that hallway with my hand on the wall and listened to Brandon's voice carry from the kitchen. Low, careful, the voice he used when he was managing something. And I understood, in a way that went past thought and straight into the body, that I had been a problem to be managed for longer than I knew. She doesn't know about the other transfers, he said. A pause while Linda talked. Because I handled it, Mom. I'm telling you, I handled it. Another pause. His voice dipped lower. Look, just don't answer if she calls. And if she shows up, just don't let her in. He was telling his mother not to let me into her house. I was 30 weeks pregnant, carrying their grandchild, their niece or nephew, the next generation of whatever this family was, and he was telling his mother to lock the door against me. I backed up 2 careful steps toward the front door, then stopped. My purse was still on my shoulder. The bank statement was still folded inside it. My hands were shaking, but not the way hands shake when you're scared. More the way they shake when something in you is recalibrating. When your nervous system is quietly deciding to stop absorbing shock and start converting it into something else. I did not go into the kitchen. I went back to my car, closed the door without slamming it, and sat in the driveway while he finished his phone call. That night was the worst night. Not because anything dramatic happened. Brandon came out of the kitchen eventually, looked at me like nothing was unusual, asked if I wanted him to order Thai food. I said sure. We sat on the couch and ate pad Thai out of containers and watched half an episode of something on Netflix. And he went to bed at 10. And I lay next to him in the dark and stared at the ceiling and felt the baby move. 3 small kicks right under my ribs, and thought, I am the only person in this house who is on her side. That sounds like a small thing. It wasn't. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from lying next to someone you have shared everything with. A bed, a bank account, 2 years of Thanksgiving dinners with his mother and her opinions about your gutters, and realizing that you are, in the most fundamental sense, alone. Not alone like single, alone like stranded. Alone like the person who is supposed to be your partner has actually been working against you, quietly and methodically, and you missed it because you were busy trusting him. I didn't sleep. I lay there until 4 a.m, and then got up and went to the kitchen and sat at the table with a glass of water and the printed bank statement and went through every line item I could remember over the past year and tried to build a map of what I didn't know. The transfers: $900 in August, $1,500 in October, $2,800 in January. Total, $5,200. All to the same account, all without a word to me. My own access, blocked cards, changed login, a savings account with $400 that Brandon didn't know about because I had opened it before we met and never mentioned it. Because why would I? You don't hide money from your husband. You don't think about having an exit account when you believe you're in a partnership. You don't. Until you do. I thought about my dad. I thought about him wiring that $3,000, excited, calling me the week before to ask if I'd decided on the crib yet, telling me to get the good one. Don't let Brandon say it's too expensive. Joking. We were joking. And I thought about how I was going to tell him what had happened to it, whether I was going to tell him at all. He had a heart condition. Not serious, not yet, but enough that my mom had started leaving the salt off the table and replacing his morning bacon with turkey strips, which he complained about loudly and ate anyway. I didn't want to tell him. I didn't want him to know that the man he had shaken hands with for 30 seconds, the man he had driven up from Savannah to take to dinner, had taken his money and handed it to his mother for a dining set. I sat there in the dark kitchen at 4 a.m, 30 weeks pregnant, and I let myself feel all of it. The humiliation, At Starbucks the next morning with the bank statement in my purse, Patricia Weiss's card tucked behind my license, and a thermos of herbal tea because I had been off caffeine since October. I got there 8 minutes early. Linda was already there. She looked smaller than usual. That was the first thing I noticed. Linda Mitchell was a woman who took up space deliberately. She had opinions, and she delivered them with the posture of someone who expected to be listened to. But that morning, she was sitting at a corner table with both hands wrapped around a coffee cup, and her shoulders pulled in like she was trying to disappear into the chair. And she looked like someone who had not slept any better than I had. She looked up when I walked in. Something moved across her face. Not quite guilt, not quite relief. Something in between. "Ashley," she said, "thank you for coming." I sat down across from her without taking my coat off. "You said you wanted to talk, so talk." She looked down at her coffee. "I know what Brandon told you about the furniture. He told me you already used the money my father sent for the nursery to order a dining set. It's not exactly..." She stopped, pressed her lips together. "He called me 3 weeks ago. He said he had some extra money and he wanted to help me replace the dining set. I told him I didn't need him to do that. He said it was already done." I felt something shift in my chest. "He didn't tell you where the money came from." "He said it was a bonus." Her hands tightened around the cup. "I didn't know it was your father's money, Ashley. I want you to know that. I would not have..." Her voice caught. "I would not have taken money meant for my grandchild." I looked at her for a long moment. "The furniture has been delivered?" "It was supposed to come yesterday. That's why I texted you." She looked up. "Brandon called me yesterday morning and said he was coming to be there for the delivery. He said I shouldn't say anything to you about it. He said you were upset and he would handle it." A pause. "He showed up at my house at 11. The delivery truck came at noon." She stopped again. "Linda," I kept my voice even. "What happened?" She pulled out her phone and set it on the table between us and turned it so I could see the screen. A text conversation with Brandon. I read the last few messages. "Mom, I need you to send me the delivery receipt and the order confirmation for the insurance." "Why would you need those for insurance? Just send them, Mom." "Brandon, what is going on?" "Nothing. Just send the files." The last message was from Linda. "I don't have them anymore. I gave them to Ashley." That message had been sent at 7:42 that morning, 20 minutes before she had texted me. I looked up at her. "You gave them to me. I'm giving them to you now." She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded envelope. "The order confirmation, the delivery receipt, and..." She paused, and I saw something in her face that looked like a woman deciding to step off a ledge. "And a bank statement. Brandon uses my address for one of his accounts. I've been getting the paper statements for 2 years. He said it was because his office address kept changing. I didn't question it." She slid the envelope across the table. I didn't open it yet. "Why are you doing this?" She was quiet for a moment. "Because when the delivery men brought in that table and those chairs yesterday, and Brandon was standing in my living room telling me how nice it looked, I asked him again where the money had come from." She paused. "And he told me the truth. Not all of it. I don't think he knows how to tell all of it. But enough. He told me it was money your father had sent for the baby. He said you didn't need it right now anyway, that you had plenty of time to get the nursery together." Her jaw tightened. And I looked at that dining table, and I thought about my grandchild not having a crib, and something just... She shook her head. Something just stopped in me. I picked up the envelope. Inside was the order confirmation for the dining set. $2,800, custom order, placed January 15th, the day after my father's wire hit our account. The delivery receipt, dated yesterday, and a bank statement for a personal checking account in Brandon's name only, at the same bank as our joint account, showing a balance of just over $6,400, with deposits that matched, almost exactly, the transfers I had seen pulled from our joint account. The $900 from August, the $1,500 from October, and the $2,800 from January, minus the $2,800 that had been paid out to the furniture company the same day it arrived. A private account. His own personal account, funded by transfers from the money we had both earned, that he had been building quietly for 6 months. My hands were completely steady when I put the documents back in the envelope. "Linda," I said, "I need to ask you something directly." She met my eyes. "Did Brandon ever talk to you about our finances? About what he was doing with our money?" She shook her head slowly. "He talked about money the way he always has, that it was tight, that he was managing it, that I didn't need to worry." She paused. "The same way he talked about everything." I nodded. I believed her. And I understood, sitting across from this woman who had never fully accepted me, but had just handed me the documents that would change everything, that Linda Mitchell was not the villain of this story. She was just another person Brandon had managed, kept close enough to feel loved, kept uninformed enough to be useful. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. She reached across the table and put her hand briefly over mine. The first time in 3 years of marriage that she had ever touched me with anything that felt like tenderness. "Take care of that baby," she said. "Whatever happens, that baby is what matters." I called Patricia Weiss from the parking lot. "I have the account statement," I said, "the private one, and the furniture receipts, and a witness." A pause. "Who's the witness?" "His mother." Another pause, longer. "Okay," she said. "Come in this afternoon. Bring everything." What happened next was not fast. I want to be clear about that, because stories like this, when you tell them to people, when you try to compress the truth of 6 months into something someone can absorb, tend to flatten the slow, grinding, bureaucratic reality of untangling a life from someone who has been quietly tightening their grip on it. It was not fast. It was not clean. There were days when I sat in Courtney's spare bedroom, where I moved 3 weeks after that Starbucks meeting, 32 weeks pregnant, with 2 suitcases and the contents of my private savings account. And I felt less like a woman taking her life back, and more like a woman waiting for the machinery to finish moving. But it did move. Patricia filed for the temporary financial restraining order the same day I brought her the documents. The court granted it within 48 hours, which Patricia said was fast, and which she attributed to the combination of the documented transfers, the private account, and my pregnancy. The order froze both parties' access to the marital assets while the divorce proceedings were initiated. Brandon called me 17 times the night the order was served. I didn't answer. He texted, "Ashley, this is insane. Call me back. We can work this out." Then, "I can explain the account." Then, at 11:15 p.m., "You're making a huge mistake." I read that last one twice and then put my phone face down on Courtney's nightstand and went to sleep. The discovery process took 2 months. During that time, I had the baby. She was born on March 14th, 8 days past her due date, 6 pounds 11 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and a specific, focused expression that my dad said looked exactly like me when I was trying to solve a problem. We named her Eleanor, after my grandmother. My dad drove up from Savannah and was in the waiting room when she was born, and when the nurse brought him in to see her for the first time, he held her for 20 minutes without saying a single word. Brandon was not there. He had been informed, through our attorneys, that he was welcome to submit a request to be present at the birth. He did not submit one. He met Eleanor for the first time 6 weeks later at a supervised visitation arranged by the court. I am not going to describe that meeting in detail because some things belong only to the people who are in the room. What I will say is that he held her and looked at her, and I watched something cross his face that I recognized as genuine. Genuine in a way that very few things about our last year together had been. And I thought, you could have had this, all of this, and you chose something else. The divorce was finalized 7 months after I walked into Patricia Weiss's office with a folded bank statement and $400 in my savings account. The private account, the $6,400 Brandon had been quietly building, was classified as dissipated marital assets. The court ordered him to reimburse me the full amount, plus a portion of my legal fees. The $2,800 in furniture was a I think about Linda sometimes. We're not close. We won't be. But she sends Eleanor a card on her birthday and at Christmas. And the cards are always addressed to Eleanor Mitchell Weaver. My last name and Brandon's, hyphenated, which is what we put on the birth certificate. And inside, she writes something small and real, not the performed warmth of someone trying to manage an impression, just something true. Last Christmas, she wrote, "I hope she knows how much she is loved." That's all. 6 words. I kept the card. I don't know exactly why. Maybe because it was the first thing Linda Mitchell ever gave me that was genuinely hers to give. My dad still calls twice a week. He has opinions about Eleanor's sleep schedule and her diet and the specific brand of baby carrier I use, and I let him have those opinions because he drove up from Savannah in February and sat in a hospital waiting room for 11 hours and held his granddaughter for 20 minutes without saying a word. And that is a man who has earned the right to an opinion about baby carriers. Eleanor is 9 months old now. She has 4 teeth and a specific delighted expression she makes when she sees the dog at the end of our block. And she has figured out how to pull herself to standing using the side of the crib, which means I am spending a significant portion of my day following her around and trying to prevent her from making contact with the floor. I went back to work 6 months ago, part-time at first, then full. My credit score is mine again. My accounts are mine. My name is on every login and every statement and every document that pertains to my financial life. And I check them myself, regularly, because that is a habit I intend to keep for the rest of my life. The crib is good. It's solid, and it doesn't creak, and Eleanor sleeps in it every night with her arms flung wide, the way babies sleep when they feel completely safe. That's what my father's money bought. Not furniture for someone else's dining room. Not a private account someone was building against me. It bought that crib, and the small, safe world inside it, and a little girl who grabs my finger like I'm the most important thing in the room. She's not wrong.